They gave everything: time, loyalty, love. Some waited years for a ring, others believed they'd found forever. But behind the red carpets and filtered Instagram posts, something was quietly falling apart. These weren't short flings or publicity stunts. These were real relationships that unraveled after years of holding on. And in the end, they weren't just heartbroken, they were left behind. From shock breakups to silent goodbyes, here are 10 celebrities who were dumped after investing years into someone who couldn't stay. At number 10 is Suki Waterhouse and Bradley Cooper. 2 years together, red carpets, quiet getaways, whispers of forever. But in 2015, it ended. No warning, no explanation, just silence. And for Suki, the silence was louder than any scandal. She called it dark and difficult. Because it wasn't just about losing him, it was about losing herself in a public spotlight that didn't care. She was heartbroken, but the world kept asking about his next film, not her pain. Suki later admitted the breakup felt disorienting, isolating, like trying to hold yourself together in a room full of cameras, while the person who once knew every part of you walks away without saying why. Cooper never spoke about it, but Suki didn't need closure to feel the cut. Because sometimes the worst heartbreak isn't the one that screams, it's the one that leaves quietly. At number 9 is Cristiano Ronaldo and Irina Shayk. 5 years. One of the world's most famous athletes, one of fashion's most iconic faces. Together, they looked untouchable, but behind the fame, she was crumbling. They rarely appeared in public, even less in private. Irina later confessed. She felt ugly and insecure in that relationship, and when someone like Irina Shayk says that, you know something was deeply wrong. She realized, too late, that she was with the wrong man, a man who made her question her worth, not with loud cruelty, but with silent neglect. Their careers kept them apart, but it was the emotional distance that hurt more than any flight. In early 2015, she walked away. And while Ronaldo continued scoring goals, Irina had to rebuild the pieces of herself no one saw. Because sometimes the most painful breakup is the one you have to survive alone. At number 8 is Lady Gaga and Taylor Kinney. They were together for 5 years, engaged, in love, but behind the engagement rings and backstage kisses, something was breaking. In her documentary 5'2", Gaga didn't hide it. She said it flat out. We had been fighting. And her threshold for pain? 0. Because while the world was applauding her success, she was losing the person she thought would be by her side forever. I sold 30 million records and lost him, she said. That one line said everything. Fame gave her the world, but it cost her someone who felt like home. The spotlight didn't just blind her, it burned what they had left. They never had a public war. No drama, just the quiet, devastating truth. Sometimes, the higher you rise, the lonelier it gets. And for Gaga, the price of her dreams was the man who couldn't stay. At number 7 is Chris Evans and Jenny Slate. He was Captain America. She was the indie voice that made people feel seen. And for a while, they made sense. 2 artists, wildly different, but deeply drawn to each other. They got engaged, then called it off, then tried again. But sometimes, love isn't enough to survive the spotlight. Jenny later admitted that being with Chris came with a pressure she never asked for. He's not stressed. I was the one that was stressed. Because while the world loved watching them, she was quietly unraveling. She didn't resent him, but she couldn't breathe either. The red carpets, the constant attention, the invisible comparisons. It was too much for someone who just wanted real love, not public perfection. So, in 2018, they ended it. Not with hate, but with heartbreak. Because sometimes, letting go isn't about falling out of love, it's about saving yourself. At number 6 is Ariana Grande and Mac Miller. They weren't just a celebrity couple, they were each other's piece in the chaos. For nearly 2 years, they built something that felt unshakable. Music, memories, healing. But in May 2018, they quietly ended it. No scandal, no drama, just the weight of 2 rising stars drowning in their own momentum. Ariana said she still adored him. But sometimes, love alone isn't enough to fix a storm inside someone. Mac was struggling. She had tried to help, but in the end, they walked separate paths, hoping time would heal them both. 4 months later, Mac Miller died from an overdose, and Ariana was left not only grieving, but wondering if leaving him had cost more than she could bear. It wasn't just a breakup, it was the kind of ending that haunts you for life. At number 5 is Lady Gaga and Taylor Kinney. 5 years together, a proposal, a future imagined. But in 2016, it all ended. In her documentary 5'2", Gaga didn't pretend. She called it what it was. We'd been fighting. And when your heart is already tired, even love starts to feel like a battle. She had just sold 30 million records, did a movie, reached the top of the world, and her voice cracked when she said, "I sold 30 million and lost him," because her rise came at the cost of her peace. And Taylor, he couldn't stay in the orbit of a star always moving. It wasn't infidelity, it wasn't betrayal, it was timing, pressure, distance, silence. They didn't just grow apart. They got lost in the noise of everything they were supposed to be. And in the quiet afterward, she was alone. Again. At number 4 is Emma Roberts and Evan Peters. 7 years. That's not a fling. That's history. They were chaos and comfort, fire and familiarity. They fought, they made up, they broke up, then ran right back to each other. Because sometimes the hardest person to leave is the one who feels like home. But by 2019, even home didn't feel safe anymore. They said it was mutual, that they grew apart. But anyone who's ever tried to let go of someone they once thought was it knows how much that hurts. Emma later opened up about the pain. It wasn't just a breakup. It was the end of something she had built her 20s around. They were on and off for years. But this time, it was final. Because sometimes love isn't soft. Sometimes it's sharp, complicated, and exhausting. And walking away doesn't mean you don't love them anymore. At number 3 is Nikki Bella and John Cena. 6 years. She waited. She hoped. She loved him out loud. They got engaged, planned a wedding, but in July 2018, she walked away. Nikki later said, "It's so much harder to walk away when it's loving." Because John didn't hurt her. He just couldn't give her what she needed. A family, a future beyond the spotlight. She loved him, but she couldn't keep shrinking to fit into his life. And in the end, she realized they weren't broken. They were just meant to live different lives. The cameras caught their smiles. But backstage, Nikki was breaking. Tears. Doubt. Silence. Because leaving someone you still love, that's a different kind of pain. She didn't leave because it stopped mattering. She left because it mattered too much. And staying would have meant slowly losing herself. At number 2 is Rihanna and Chris Brown. What started as a passionate young romance between two rising stars quickly spiraled into something darker than anyone imagined. By 2009, Rihanna and Chris Brown had become one of the most talked about couples in the music industry. Two global icons deeply in love, constantly in the public eye. But on the eve of the Grammy Awards, everything shattered. Brown assaulted Rihanna during an argument, leaving her bruised, bloodied, and broken. Not just physically, but emotionally. The world saw the photos. The headlines were brutal, and what had once been a fairy tale collapsed into a nightmare. The breakup was immediate, but the emotional scars lingered for years. Rihanna later spoke about how the incident changed her, how it took everything to rebuild her sense of trust, safety, and strength. This wasn't just a breakup. That didn't happen in weeks. It took years. At number 1 is Tiger Woods and Lindsey Vonn. For nearly 3 years, they were sports royalty, two legends at the top of their game, trying to make love work in the margins of their success. But in May 2015, that love quietly ended. Lindsey Vonn announced the breakup first, calling it mutual, chalking it up to hectic lives and never-ending distance. Tiger echoed the sentiment. Their careers, demanding and relentless, kept pulling them in opposite directions, until there was nothing left to pull back together. But beneath the polished statements was something softer, sadder. They had tried, they had planned, and they had hoped that love would be enough to conquer the calendar. Instead, they found themselves more familiar with hotel lobbies and headlines than each other's presence. And in the end, it wasn't anger or betrayal that ended them. It was time. Time they never had. Time they never got back. Love doesn't always last, even for the famous. If this hit you, like the video, subscribe for more untold stories, and share it with someone who still believes in love.